So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. I mean, being the first one to speak at a conference is incredibly difficult. My job, essentially, I was informed yesterday that go and wake them up, which is why my talk is about sleeping. Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I feel we'll manage. Also, I like how are the lights in my face, so I can see if you are actually sleeping back there. It's okay. Take a nap. I think it's going to be on YouTube, so we'll be able to catch up. I would like to start this talk by addressing the most important person in the room. And that person is you. You are the most important one. At a conference like this, there's 15 speakers and 327 people. So it makes more sense to focus on the majority instead of this one dude on stage. So I do have a question for you. Why are you afraid of pushing stuff to production on Friday? Like, why is that? What is the difference between Tuesday and Friday when it comes to production releases? Well, I'm not entirely sure, and there's this ongoing debate going on Twitter and other social media about whether you should push to prod at all. So you have those voices in the community saying that do not push to prod, it's not worth it. Just leave your office and go home. And you have this asshole. It's Friday, push to prod, break the world, like who cares? It's going to be fine. And who is correct here? Well, I don't know. So what I did, I reached out to a team of elite scientists, and this is what they came up with. So if you push to production on Friday, there's a 120% chance that it's going to break. Of course, this is not true. It's actually 150. But this is what we feel. And this talk will be about how we can be a bit more confident about shipping our software. Let's talk about testing. My name is Tomasz Łakomy. I work as a senior front-end engineer at Olex Group. You can find me on Twitter at Telakomy, but beware, I tweet quite a lot. Too much, to be honest. I'm addicted. And I work for Olex Group. And if you are Polish, you are probably aware of this website that we have. So it is Olex Poland, which is one of the biggest websites in the country and also, I think, the biggest marketplace in this country as well. But I was honestly not aware before I joined the company that there's also multiple other websites. So Olex Romania, Olex Portugal, Olex Kazakhstan, and many, many others. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that if we maintain so many websites, it's kind of difficult for us to answer the question, does it actually work? If I'm going to push something to Poland, am I breaking Uzbekistan as a result? It is tricky, and this is a question that every developer tries to answer before they release a new production release. But there's also an underlying question behind that, and the question is, why do we care in the first place? Because to be fair, no matter how many bugs you're going to push to production, you're probably going to get paid at the end of each month. Well, within limits, of course, right? If you're going to push 1,000 bugs, well, probably not so much. But it's not about the money. I like to think it's about something else entirely. I like to think it's about empathy. I like to think that we should and we do care about others. So for instance, we do care about our users because, well, they are the reason why we are here. We develop software so that our users can, well, use it. So we care about them. We take ownership into providing them with the best user experience we can possibly give them. And that is especially true if you're working on a website which allows people to earn a living. Like they can, for instance, sell something, provide their services, record videos, whatever. You have this tremendous responsibility to your users. And it's also about other team members. Because if you decide, it's Friday, 7 p.m., there's no tests, okay, I'm going just to push it to prod. I'm not on call today, so who cares? We don't do that, well, usually, because we care for other team members, and also it's not fun for them. And we also, as human beings, we need to feel safe, like having this bumper, because we have to be comfortable with pushing to prod, and we have to be comfortable with the idea that no one is going to wake us up at 2 a.m. because something is broken. And during this talk, I would like to address the entire testing spectrum. So I believe there's a spectrum when it comes to tests. There are tests that are closer to the developer and kind of further from the user, And there's also tests that are very, very close to the user. So we're going to go through that. So there's nothing close to the developer when it comes to testing than unit tests. I mean, those are the tests that you write for your code. And I do have a personal opinion about unit tests, and the fact is they're amazing. I'm a huge fan of unit tests. My team at work, we have over 80% unit test coverage, which is 80%. The thing is, as soon as you attach a number to something, it becomes a metric. It's 80%, so why not 100? You can aim for 100, and some teams actually do it. I've noticed a CK editor, they have a 100% test coverage. And that is okay. But the thing is, if you are chasing 100% coverage, you may end up with this. So this is obviously 100%, like everything is covered, but it doesn't work. And this is just a silly image, but I think it highlights an important point, that if you misunderstood the requirements and you write your code, then your unit tests are not going to catch that, because you're asserting that your code is exactly as broken as you think it is. Also, figuring out what to test is tricky, because, well, you could test everything, but it's not easy, so you have to figure out what exactly I'm going to test. And my favorite example is Amazon.com. So at the very bottom of Amazon.com, that's true, you can actually look it up after I'm finished talking on production. If you scroll down to the very bottom, there's this meowing ducky. And to the best of my knowledge, they have tests to assert that this ducky is always in the markup of Amazon.com. So if someone is going to remove that, you cannot push to prod. And this is what we're going to talk about for the next 30 minutes. On a more serious note, I'm a huge fan of Kenzie Dodds, and he tweeted a while ago that the more your tests resemble the way your software is used, the more confidence they can give you. So the closer your tests are to the way users are, well, using your software, the better they become. To give you an example, we're going to do a public code review. And since we do have a code of conduct, this is my own personal code review. So this is a code that I've personally written. And this test is okay so far. So we have a component that's going to render a toggle component. We're checking whether it exists and whether it has a label, behold the best toggle. That is okay so far. This part, well, not so much. So I'm checking whether this toggle has two props. Thing is, users are not aware of props. They don't really care. Next up, I'm going to click on the toggle and check if I have a class name of toggly_McToggleface. And again, this is something that developers care about, well, users not so much. Users are not typically aware of class names. And this test is kind of far away from the user. Another thing that I actually had to struggle with was, well, my tests were broken because I decided to use React hooks. This talk is not React specific, but this core idea that the same way as your users are not aware if you are using Angular, React, Svelte, Vue, or jQuery, the same way your tests should not be aware what you have under the hood. They shouldn't care at all. You should be able to refactor your code while, of course, keeping the public API untouched, and your tests should be still passing. That is why I do strongly recommend checking out the testinglibrary.com. It's a library, it's a family of testing libraries for React, Vue, Svelte, Angular, for everything, really. And they have this idea that they do encourage good practices by providing you with the API that it makes it quite difficult to write bad tests. And to give you an example, what we have over here is a test written with this approach. And you will notice a bunch of things here. There's no class names. There's no props. We are starting by labels, texts, and the things that users can see and users can interact with. And using this approach, you end up writing less tests, but they will be better because they will give you more confidence since they are very close to the user. Users don't typically interact with our code. Unless you're providing API as a service, there's probably some UI. And the thing is, when it comes to UI, when it comes to users generally want two things. They want to be able to use your product to accomplish their goals, and they want to be done using your product so they can move on. Like, our job as developers is to make it easy as possible to use our stuff. In short, no one enjoys ordering an Uber. Like, the activity alone of opening the app, searching for the place, selecting a car and clicking get me home this is not fun. What is fun, though, is probably going from point A to point B because we are too drunk to stand and we want to go home. That is fun. So in other words, our job as developers is to ensure that the value our app is supposed to provide is always there. And to be fair, your users are going to be on mobile. According to the newest data, close to 50% of website traffic worldwide comes from mobile devices. And this is excluding tablets. By the way, it actually went down a bit. I think it's because of Netflix. Like, we are watching more Netflix on TV, so it actually went down. And there's another thing. We developers, we tend to have two devices. We tend to have our laptops and we tend to have our smartphone. And in the vast majority of cases, our equipment is superior to our users. Like, we are geeks and we tend to buy, the newest phones as soon as they're released. Our laptops are freaking amazing. You could just do whatever with those. We don't have this on our desk, typically. Even if we did, being able to develop on all those devices at the very same time was historically quite difficult. And what I think comes very close to addressing this problem is CZ. So CZ is a browser for developers and designers, which allows you to develop on multiple virtualized devices at the very same time. So I'm working on my blog, Łakomy, by the way, łakomy.com, put it as your homepage. So I'm going to show you an example. I'm able to scroll down on this device, and all those devices are updated as well, so I can see what's going on. And next up, I can switch every device to landscape. Back again. It is a browser, so I'm going to inspect an element and change this title to this beautiful shade of magenta. There you go, amazing design. I'm awesome when it comes to design. I'm going to change the title of the blog to be a bit longer, for SEO purposes. There you go, it looks okay. I'm going to delete the title on this one device. Looks terrible. I'm going to reboot all those devices. And now I would like to get some input from the team. So I'm going to enter the photo mode, and I'm going to screenshot all those devices at the very same time. This is incredibly useful. If you are doing any design work, CSS work, or design system, anything like that, anything that you have to ensure that your site is not broken across different screen resolutions, this is a godsend. I do highly recommend you go and check it out. Let's talk about end-to-end testing. We are going closer and closer and closer to the user. The thing is, we need automation. We need automation in order to assert our software. Controversial slide incoming. If you take a sum of your development team and your users, then statistically speaking, no one cares about unit tests. If you think about it, like, users want to be able to use your software, and even you don't care about unit tests. Think about it. If you want to order a pizza online, and there's like 3 different websites, what you care about is being able to log in, select a pizza, pay for the pizza. Well, that's kind of important. You are not going to check how many unit tests they have. And also for us as developers, our core flows have to work at all times. No one is going to check the login page every single time you push something to production. This is why more and more teams are turning towards automation. Because automation allows us to, automate all those things that are difficult to test and they take lots of time. And I was personally a member of multiple engineering teams in various companies, and in most of those teams we did attempt automation. And the issue that we've had all the time was stability issues. So we had tests that were passing on Monday, failing on Tuesday. Some tests were related to position between Mars and Jupiter, like if those 2 planets aligned, the test would pass. And honestly, maintaining those was not easy. It was not fun for anybody involved. And it added up to this complete feeling of distrust. Well, we didn't trust those tests. Like, they were failing all the time, so honestly, who cares? We have to ship anyway. And I'm being really honest right now. It's better to have no tests whatsoever than to have tests that you don't trust. Because if you have no tests, you haven't spent any time writing those, and honestly, you're being honest. Every single release is a YOLO release. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is why I think that Cypress is helping us a lot. I've been using Cypress for the last 18 months professionally, and as they say on the web page, and it's written in large font, so you have to believe that, the web has evolved, and finally testing has as well. And it is a different approach when it comes to testing. And what I would like to do, because to be fair, it doesn't make so much sense to just talk about Cypress, I'm going to do some practical demos. To be fair, I think that live demos are a terrible idea, and live coding is even, it's an even worse idea. Well, this is amazing wallpaper. So what I'm going to do is that we're going to do some live coding. So we have this to-do app, which I'm sure you've seen one of those. You can add an item, remove an item. But imagine this is a mission-critical app. Your livelihood depends on this application. Well, you probably want to be able to test it. So here on the left side, we have my Visual Studio Code. Right side is the Cypress UI. Right now, I have this very complicated test. I'm asserting whether true equals true. And boy, oh boy, it's true. If I change it to false, save it, the test is going to restart automatically, and I'm going to assert that, well, true is in fact true. Cypress maintains this speed of development when it comes to tests. Like every single time you hit save, the test is going to restart automatically. And in essence, you can do a test-driven development. Because if you're not entirely sure what you want to test, you can just dig in, start testing, and this core experience of writing tests is very efficient. So I'm going to do some actual testing. Let me just go ahead, copy this URL. And the way you interact with the Cypress UI, API is through the global CY object. Nope. I don't want any Bitcoin, goddammit. CY, there we go. So now we're going to visit the page. And I'm going to show you a couple of things in the UI itself. First up, and this blew my mind the first time I saw it, this is fully interactive. I can add an item, remove an item within the Cypress UI. You cannot do that in Jenkins. This is incredibly useful because sometimes your tests end up in this weird spot and you want to be able to dig in what exactly is going on. This allows you to do that. Next up, if I hover over a request, I'm able to see the state of the app changing before and after the request was sent from the server. If I click on the request, I can do it manually to see, okay, this is before request, this is after the request. I don't know about you, but since I'm a senior developer, I do most of my debugging using console log, like everybody. Cypress has console-driven debugging by default. So if you click on the request, you can go ahead and check out the body, and you can see exactly what the server has returned in this case. Again, incredibly useful stuff. So now we're going to do some testing. So first up, you have a debugger, you have DevTools, so you can just go ahead and check out the selector. So this to-do list li. All right, cool. So I'm going to assert if we have those items. So I'm going to write ci get, and get this. This is actually jQuery, which is amazing. jQuery is amazing, and this is fine because we are not shipping this to the user. Should have length of 3. There you go. Now we have a passing test. Awesome. Can I go home now? No, not really. It's a terrible test. Because what if someone were to do this? Whoops. I'm going to restart the test, and now it's going to fail. Okay, so what do? I know what you're thinking. There you go. No, because someone can delete, add something. So my recommendation is to call a meeting and tell everybody not to touch that, which is, of course, not going to work. So what we want to have is to be able to control this and the beginning state of your test. So you are supposed to start from the state that you know exactly what's going to happen next. With Cypress, you can control the server entirely to avoid interacting with the actual backend. You can do that, and I do recommend writing your tests against actual backend, but not every single test has to work like that. So in essence, you can start a server, and tell Cypress, okay, whenever there's a GET request to this API, I would like to return this array. By the way, I'm so good at live coding that I'm going to do it with only one hand. Oh, sorry, it's 9 a.m. Close enough. Right now we have a passing test, right? I want to have 4 to the items, and I do have 4 to the items. Fantastic, awesome. What do I do next? Because if I end up writing more tests, I will probably copy and paste this array over and over again. This is not something that we want. With Cypress, you can use fixtures. So when you create a new Cypress project, you get access to a fixtures directory, and here you can define JSON files that you can use in your tests. So instead of this giant array, I'm just going to do fixture to-dos. And there you go. Now we have a passing test. Okay, let me fail this test. You will notice that it's not going to fail in an instant. It's actually going to wait some time. It waits for 4 seconds. The idea is that, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but some of the web apps out there are kind of slow. So Cypress is actually aware of that some things take time. It's going to happen eventually. Let me do something else. I'm going to make my app slow on purpose. So I'm going to send this request for load to-dos after 5 seconds. And I'm going to fix this test. But it's still going to break because I'm asserting if I have 4 items after 4 seconds, but the request itself is sent after 5. And this does happen. Sometimes you have slow responses from the backend, and that's okay. Things sometimes do take time. So with Cypress, you can set an alias to a request. So henceforth, this request shall be known as load. And over here, I can decide to wait for it. Wait a load. And right now, I'm sending a request after 5 seconds, and I'm still waiting for it. And now I have a passing test. Of course, this is going to wait within limits. By default, it's up to 30 seconds. I think if something doesn't happen in 30 seconds, you probably want to fail the test anyway. And that is all right. Next up, this whole dance of setting up a server, setting up routes, visiting the homepage, waiting for things to happen, this is probably something that you end up doing over and over again in your tests. With Cypress, you can define custom commands. So you can add an initialize app command that is going to do all those 4 steps. And instead of doing this, I can just do this single command. And I'm going to make my app fast again. There you go, 0. Now I'm going to go back to my test, save the test, and it's going to work automatically. You can nest custom commands within custom commands, but please don't go too far. Your tests are supposed to be easy to understand. You are supposed to be debugging your code, not your tests. So don't go too far. I would like to show you a bit complicated example of a test that I've written. So right now I'm asserting whether there's a 500 response from the server. I want to assert there's an error. So I'm going to initialize the app, get the new to-do input, type some text, press the enter key, wait for the request to resolve, and I'm asserting, okay, there's no more to the items added, and there's an error message. The best part, we didn't have to go through this code because we can just go over here inside of Cypress and just hover over those elements. And you can see exactly what your test is doing. You can see exactly how the state of your app is changing over time and what you are asserting for. This is amazing stuff. I do highly recommend Cypress. I've been using it, like I've mentioned, for the last 18 months. And with Cypress, get this, we get to test our code and not our patience. This is amazing stuff. Speaking of patience, you can actually run your tests on multiple machines at once. So in my team, we're running those tests on 7 different machines, and they take around a minute. And they are able to test the vast majority of our core flows. It is a silver bullet. It's not a silver bullet. There are things that are difficult to test for a robot. Consider this website, ConFrontJS. Amazing conference, by the way. I'm going to break it with a single line of CSS. Can a robot test that? No, not really. Because Cypress is not aware, it doesn't have eyes, so it cannot see. It can see the DOM. DOM is not touched here. DOM is okay. There's buttons, labels, everything is in place. Your issues are not going to be obvious as this. Consider eBay. The whole business model of eBay is built on trust. You as the user, you trust eBay that if you can afford this car, by the way, if you click on this buy it now button, you will send them the money and they will send your car. What if there was a typo on this button? By the way, I am not going to zoom in. Those things are going to be difficult to notice, and that is the core point. There's a typo on buy it now button, but this is probably something that Cypress would probably catch. This, changing the font to Comic Sans, the best font, by the way, not so much. This is even worse. Because this seems like, I'm supposed to give this website nearly $200,000 and they cannot style a single button. This is not good for your business. The entire user trust is broken because of a single button. This button was the most important button on the page for eBay. And now no one is going to, some people are going to click it. But the vast majority of users will be highly suspicious, like something is going on there, something's fishy. And this is why visual regression is something that also more and more teams are turning towards. So the core idea is that you are able to see how your app visual side of things is changing over time. So you basically, what you do is you compare two images. You have a baseline, your approved design of your app, and you are comparing this with a new updated version. Technically, it's been around for a bit. This approach is nothing really new, and there are open source libraries that actually do that. The thing is, they mostly operate on a pixel-to-pixel basis, and they do have some problems. So take Bootstrap.js as an example. What they do is that they do a pixel-by-pixel comparison. So if you have those two images on the left side, and they are identical, but one of them was rendered on a Linux machine, another was rendered on Mac. There's a slight difference in the font. No one here would notice, but the machine does. And it's going to fail the test, which shouldn't be a failure. I was doing some research preparing for this talk, and I found about this company and tool called ApplyTools. It is nearly 2020, so everything is AI and machine learning can also do that. So they do AI-powered visual testing and monitoring. The core idea is really interesting. You write your test using Cypress, Selenium, whatever you want. I think there's lots of things that are supported. You use their SDK to extract a DOM snapshot. Then it's going to be sent to the server. It's going to generate screenshots on multiple browsers. So you, as a developer, you don't have to run those tests on Firefox and Chrome. It's going to do it for you in the cloud. And then it's going to compare images and show you exactly what's the difference using their visual AI. So it's no longer on pixel-by-pixel basis. Consider this login form. Looks okay so far. Username, password, login. You know how it works. If I wanted to test it with Cypress, this is the amount of code I ended up writing. You are not expected to read all of that. But the key is that you have to test for the placeholder, for the images, for all the labels and whatnot. There's plenty of code. With ApplyTools, I was able to test this login form using this. So I'm going to visit the page, open my eyes, set up a test, check the window. You can also check not only the window, but also an element on the page, and close the eyes to send the data to the server. And this is what you're going to get in the UI. So right now, login form is okay. I'm going to mark it as fine, and it's going to become my baseline. I've made some changes to this login form. Very difficult to notice, isn't it? Especially when you had no idea what was there before. This label was changed from username to login. That's actually by design. There's a typo in password that is not by design. And this remember me has been shifted to the right. Again, not by design. Those things will be difficult to notice. Because you as a developer, you're probably used to your own login page, your home page. This is something that you see over and over again. It's surprisingly difficult to notice things like that. ApplyTools will notice that. So it's going to highlight exactly what regions are broken in your app. And you can decide to fail this test. So this thing is actually a typo. So I'm going to ensure that those tests are going to fail. And unless I fix that, I cannot release this to production. This part is okay. So even though there is a difference, I'm going to mark it as an ignore region because it's by design. By the way, if you are not entirely sure what happened, that the design is broken, they do also provide a root cause analysis. So you can see whether it was HTML, CSS, or something else entirely. If you would like to learn more about ApplyTools, I cannot recommend more following Angie Jones on Twitter and checking out this talk. Your tests lack vision. She's a senior development advocate at ApplyTools, and her stuff is amazing. Highly recommend that. There's more. There's an ultimate form of testing. Because nothing is more tragic than developing the wrong software. In order to avoid that, talk to your users. Imagine building a product for 2 years, having the micro-REST microservices, the micro frontends, the best frameworks, CSS and libraries, push it to prod, and no one wants to use it because we haven't talked to the users. At work, we have one of those interrogation rooms, UX laboratories. So we invite our users to the office, and they are going to sit with a researcher in one of the rooms, and the entire development team is going to sit in the next room. And we learn so much from those sessions, like watching our users interact with our software and also our mock-ups before we start development is incredibly useful. By the way, you do not need a fancy room to do that. I do highly recommend this book from Steve Crook called Rocket Surgery Made Easy. It's going to teach you all you need to know about how to talk to your users and how do those kind of testing. If you haven't sat with your user, I do strongly recommend that. You're going to learn an amazing lot about your very own software. I have only a minute, so I would like to give you some key takeaways from this talk. If you actually fell asleep, this is probably a good time to wake up. Care deeply about the user. Users are the reason why we are here. And honestly, they do deserve the best experience we can give them. The closer your tests are to the user, the more confidence they can give you. So think about the user and think about what you can test to be closer to the user themselves. And lastly, take care of yourself. Don't push yourself too hard. Because no matter how much you test, things happen. And that is okay. That is to be expected. Thank you, and good night.
Bravo, bravo. Fantastic, fantastic presentation. Okay, because we're running a little bit behind, we have time, think about this, for one important question. Who has that question for Tomasz? One question. Anybody have it? I can't see. You do? I hope it's a good one because this is the only question we're going to be able to push. Where are you? They've made it difficult to see. Okay, hold on a second.
Hi. We are using Cypress in our application. We have almost 1,000 tests.
Jeez.
And what do you think about the performance of these tests? Could you tell something how to improve the speed of testing? Because our test, it takes about 4 hours for about 1,000 tests, and we have
are you running those on a single machine or are you going to run those in parallel?
It depends on the environment. Sometimes it is on localhost, and sometimes it is on our external services.
Okay, so what I would recommend, it is a paid feature, just in case. So Cypress has this Cypress dashboard feature that you can enable. It's going to cost you some money, depends on your scale. We actually paid quite a lot. So what they do is that, for instance, on our GitLab CI, it's going to start 7 different instances. And on those 7 instances, those tests are going to run in parallel. And you basically get a significant reduction in your speed of tests. Another thing that I could think of is maybe think about how you can split those tests into suites, because I'm not entirely sure if you need to run 1,000 tests every single time you change something. I'm sure there are some significant changes that require you to run all those tests, but my personal approach is that we have tests that are running on every single pull request, and they are very fast and efficient, and we also have a full set of tools, full suite of tests that's going to run before we push everything to prod. So maybe there's another approach. But I'm more than happy to talk after I'm finished talking.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm not able to see you, so please come find me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tomek. Yes, sure. Let's give him a big hand, everybody.